My name is Abigail Harper. Most people call me Abby. I'm 39 years old, a pediatric nurse living in Portland, Oregon. I've spent my entire career trying to read people, to see through their pain, their fear, their pretenses. I thought I was good at it, until the day I realized that my best friend, Vanessa Caldwell, had been wearing a mask all along. Vanessa wasn't just a friend. She was like a sister to me. We met in college at Oregon State, survived heartbreaks together, celebrated marriages, and raised our daughters side by side. She was that one person I believed would never hurt me. The woman who seemed to have it all figured out. The perfect smile, the perfect home, the perfect family. But perfection, I would learn, can hide the darkest truths. This isn't only my story. It's also my daughter Sophie's, who's 16, and Chloe's, also 16, Vanessa's daughter and Sophie's best friend. Two girls who grew up like sisters in our quiet neighborhood, sharing secrets, laughter, and late-night talks about dreams and fears. What none of us saw coming was how quickly love could turn into control, how friendship could turn into betrayal, and how one act of selfishness could nearly destroy a child's life. I used to think monsters had faces you could recognize. But the truth is, sometimes they smile, bake cookies for the school fundraiser, and wave to your kids from across the street. Sometimes they sit at your kitchen table and call themselves your best friend. This story is about what happens when the mask finally slips, when the truth forces its way to the surface, no matter how tightly it's been hidden. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories. They're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. Abby and Vanessa met during their freshman year at Oregon State University. Back then, they were inseparable, two ambitious young women sharing late-night coffee, swapping dreams, and promising to always have each other's backs. Abby went into nursing, driven by her love for children, while Vanessa majored in business and always seemed to know exactly where she was going. Years later, they both settled in Portland, each starting families within a year of the other. Their daughters, Sophie and Chloe, grew up side by side, birthday parties, soccer practice, sleepovers. Abby often joked that they were raising sisters from different mothers. The bond between the families felt effortless, natural, something that everyone around them admired. Vanessa's home always drew people in. It was the kind of place that looked straight out of a magazine, bright, minimal, but somehow still cozy. Fresh flowers on the counter, cinnamon candles burning in the kitchen, framed photos of her smiling family lining the hallway. She hosted the best gatherings, always with homemade food and that picture-perfect smile. Abby admired her. How organized she seemed, how she made motherhood look so easy. To Abby, Vanessa wasn't just a friend. She was an anchor, a person who understood without needing words. When Abby worked long shifts at the hospital, Vanessa was the one who picked Sophie up from school or dropped off a casserole on nights Abby didn't have time to cook. They were each other's support system, and Abby often thought how lucky she was to have someone like Vanessa in her corner. There was something magnetic about Vanessa. She had this calm, polished grace that made everyone feel slightly inadequate, but somehow she never appeared arrogant. Her laughter was gentle, her compliments thoughtful, her life seemingly flawless. She talked about her husband, Derek, with admiration. She volunteered at the local shelter. She even remembered everyone's birthdays. Sometimes, though, Abby caught herself wondering, how does she do it all? How does someone always look that put together, that unbothered? Vanessa never showed cracks. She was patient with Chloe, affectionate with Derek, and always composed, even when others would lose their temper. Abby once said, "You make perfection look effortless," to which Vanessa only smiled and replied, "Oh, Abby, we all have our ways of surviving." It was a strange thing to say, and Abby remembered it later, how Vanessa's eyes had lingered on her just a second too long, as if there was something deeper beneath that polished exterior. At the time, Abby brushed it off. She didn't think much about it. But years later, she would come to realize that Vanessa's perfection wasn't effortless at all. It was crafted, controlled, and it hid something she couldn't yet see. But perfection, I learned, was just her mask. When Vanessa told Abby she was flying to Hawaii for a week-long self-care trip, Abby didn't hesitate to help. "Of course," she said. "Chloe can stay with us." It wasn't the first time. Abby had always thought of Chloe like a second daughter. Quiet, artistic, a little withdrawn but sweet-natured. She assumed the girl just needed some space while her mother recharged. The first 2 days passed without incident. Chloe and Sophie watched movies, studied together, even baked cookies. Abby worked short shifts at the hospital and came home to find them sprawled on the couch, laughing softly about something on TikTok. It felt normal, peaceful, until the third day. That morning, Abby noticed Chloe didn't come down for breakfast. At first, she assumed the teenager was just sleeping in. But by lunchtime, her room was still locked, and the tray of pancakes Abby left outside remained untouched. Sophie grew uneasy. "Mom, she's not answering me," she said, knocking again. No sound. A cold sense of dread crawled over Abby. She knocked harder, called her name, nothing. Then she found herself jiggling the handle, her heartbeat quickening. "Chloe, honey, open the door," she pleaded. Silence. She could hear her own pulse pounding in her ears. Finally, she grabbed a bobby pin from Sophie's hair and picked the lock, her hands trembling. The door opened. For a second, her mind refused to register what she was seeing. Chloe was sprawled across the floor beside her bed, motionless, her skin pale and lips bluish. On the nightstand, an empty orange prescription bottle. Next to it, a crumpled piece of paper, barely legible from smudged ink. "I'm not enough." Abby's voice broke. "Sophie, call 911. Now." She dropped to her knees, checked for a pulse, faint but there. "Stay with me, Chloe. Stay with me." She began chest compressions, counting aloud, her voice cracking. Sophie stood frozen, tears streaking her cheeks as the operator's voice echoed through the phone. The sirens arrived within minutes, but to Abby it felt like hours. Paramedics rushed in, cutting through the silence with commands and equipment. The smell of alcohol wipes, the beeping of the heart monitor, the sharp clatter of the gurney wheels, all blurred together in Abby's mind. She followed them to the ambulance, clutching the note in her hand like a piece of evidence she didn't understand. At the hospital, Abby stood by as doctors and nurses fought to stabilize Chloe. Tubes, monitors for lines, everything she'd seen 100 times as a nurse, but this time it felt unbearable. Sophie sat in the corner, hugging her knees, whispering prayers under her breath. Finally, Abby stepped out and called Vanessa. Her hand shook as she dialed. When Vanessa's voice came through, it was cheerful, distant, background music, ocean waves, and laughter behind her. "Vanessa," Abby said, her voice trembling. "It's Chloe. She overdosed. We're at St. Mary's. You need to come home." There was a pause, and then Vanessa sighed. "Oh, Abby. She's probably just acting out again. She does this for attention." Abby froze. "She's on a ventilator, Vanessa," she shouted, disbelief cutting through her exhaustion. But Vanessa's tone didn't change. "I'll see what I can do," she said flatly. "I can't just abandon everything here. This trip was for my mental health." Then she hung up. Abby stood in the corridor, phone still pressed to her ear, her reflection trembling in the glass wall of the ICU. Behind it, Chloe's chest rose and fell under the steady rhythm of the machine. Beep, pause, beep. The sterile hospital air felt suffocating. That night, as Abby sat beside Chloe's bed, Sophie asleep in a chair beside her, she opened her phone and, without meaning to, stumbled onto Vanessa's social media. A new post. Vanessa, in a wide-brimmed hat, holding a pink cocktail against a golden sunset. The caption read, "Paradise found." Abby stared at the screen, disbelief turning slowly into nausea. In the background, she could hear the steady pulse of the heart monitor. Sounded like an accusation. Two worlds playing side by side. One girl fighting for her life, one mother toasting the view. That was the first crack. And once it appeared, Abby couldn't unsee it. 3 days after the overdose, Vanessa finally came home. Abby was sitting in the hospital waiting area, reviewing Chloe's latest test results, when she saw her friend walk through the glass doors. Vanessa looked radiant, sun-kissed skin, hair in perfect waves, gold bangles jingling on her wrist. She was wearing a white linen dress that looked more suited for a beach brunch than a hospital visit. "Hey," Vanessa said lightly, as if she'd just come back from running errands. "Where's my luggage?" Abby stared at her. Your luggage, she repeated, incredulous. Vanessa, your daughter almost died. Vanessa adjusted her sunglasses. Yes, and I'm here now. No need for the guilt trip, Abby. I told you she's dramatic. Abby felt something inside her twist, something between rage and heartbreak. Dramatic, she whispered. She wrote, I'm not enough. She could have died, Vanessa. She still might. Vanessa sighed, flipping her hair back. You always exaggerate everything. I swear, you're starting to sound like my mother. She waved a dismissive hand. Can we not make this about your savior complex right now? I just got off a red eye. Abby took a step closer, lowering her voice so the nurses wouldn't hear. This isn't about me. Chloe needs help. I spoke to the therapist at St. Mary's. There's a treatment plan, a recovery path. But before she could finish, Vanessa's eyes flared. A treatment plan? She repeated sharply. Who gave you permission to do that? You don't make decisions for my daughter. Abby blinked. I didn't make any decisions. I just wanted to help. Help. Vanessa cut in, her voice rising. You've been interfering for years. Acting like you know what's best for Chloe, for me. You're always trying to control everything. Maybe this, she gestured toward the hospital room, was your way of keeping her close. Maybe you wanted her to need you more than me. The words hit like glass shards. Abby's breath caught in her throat. You can't be serious, she said quietly. Vanessa, she was crying for you. Every time she woke up, she asked if her mom had called. Vanessa's expression didn't change. She looked away, tapping her phone. Well, I didn't see the point in feeding her attention-seeking behavior. It just encourages her. In the next room, Chloe stirred. The commotion must have woken her. She sat up weakly, her foreline tugging slightly. Mom! Her voice cracked, barely audible. Why are you yelling? Vanessa turned, her tone softening for the first time, but only on the surface. Sweetheart, you scared everyone. Mommy just wants you to be okay. Chloe's eyes filled with tears. You weren't here. The silence that followed was unbearable. Abby stepped forward instinctively. Chloe, it's okay. But Vanessa spun toward her. Don't you dare, she snapped. Don't you ever talk to her like she's yours. Something in Abby broke. I'm talking to her like she's a child who needed her mother, she shot back. You were in Hawaii drinking cocktails while your daughter was being resuscitated. Vanessa's face hardened. You think you're better than me, don't you? She said quietly. Always the perfect nurse, the perfect friend, the perfect mother. Well, newsflash, Abby, you don't get to judge me. The argument escalated. Nurses glanced over, whispering. Chloe buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Abby reached toward her, but Vanessa blocked the view, glaring. Then suddenly, Vanessa turned away and pulled out her phone. Abby assumed she was calling a cab, or maybe her husband. But minutes later, 2 police officers walked in. Abby Harper, one of them asked. Abby frowned. Yes. What's going on? The officer's tone was neutral but firm. We received a report from Miss Caldwell. She alleges that you unlawfully detained her minor daughter without consent. Abby stared at Vanessa, speechless. You called the police on me? Vanessa crossed her arms. You overstepped, Abby. You had no right to keep her here. You made decisions behind my back. This isn't your child. Abby tried to speak, but the officer gently raised a hand. Ma'am, please. We just need to confirm custody and escort Chloe home. Chloe's face went pale. No, she whispered. I don't want to go. I want to stay with Abby. Vanessa's expression flickered. Embarrassment, anger, then control. Chloe, she said sweetly, don't make this harder than it already is. You're coming home. The officers exchanged a look. Abby's throat tightened. Please, she said softly. At least let her finish treatment. She's not ready. It's not your call, Vanessa said, her voice cold and final. They escorted Chloe toward the exit. The girl clung to her hospital blanket, trembling. As she passed Abby, she turned, eyes wide, glassy, desperate. It was a look Abby would never forget. A look that said, help me. And then she was gone. Abby stood frozen in the hallway, surrounded by the quiet hum of hospital machinery and the fading echo of Chloe's sobs. For the first time in her career, she couldn't heal what was broken. Not in Chloe, Not in Vanessa. Not even in herself. It started quietly, like whispers behind closed doors. Abby first noticed the change at work. Her colleagues, who once greeted her with warm smiles, now exchanged uneasy glances when she entered the break room. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Her supervisor, usually relaxed and trusting, suddenly began double-checking her patient charts. Something in the air had shifted. Then one morning, a coworker pulled her aside. "Abby," she said hesitantly, "I probably shouldn't say this, but people are talking. Vanessa's been saying you tried to take her daughter away. That you—" She hesitated. "Crossed boundaries." Abby froze. She said what? The woman looked uncomfortable. "That you were obsessed with Chloe. That you wanted to keep her." "I don't believe it," she added quickly. "But others, well, you know how gossip spreads." Abby felt the room tilt. Her best friend, the woman she'd trusted for nearly 2 decades, was painting her as a manipulative predator. The same woman whose daughter she'd saved from death. The following days were a blur of humiliation and disbelief. Parents in the pediatric ward looked at her differently. One even requested another nurse just to be safe. The story was out of control. And the worst part? Vanessa's version sounded believable, because she told it with practiced grace, with that same perfect smile that had charmed everyone for years. "She was trying to replace me," Vanessa told mutual friends at brunch. "She took advantage of Chloe's vulnerability. I mean, what kind of woman keeps someone else's child without permission?" And people nodded, because they only saw the surface. At school, Sophie began noticing the fallout too. A group of girls cornered her near her locker. "Your mom's crazy," one of them sneered. "Did she really kidnap Chloe?" Sophie tried to stay calm, but her hands shook. Later that week, Vanessa herself appeared at the school parking lot, leaning casually against her SUV. When Sophie approached, Vanessa smiled in that way that wasn't really a smile. "You tell your mother," she said softly, "to stay out of my family. Or next time, I'll make sure she loses more than just her job." Sophie didn't answer. She just got into her car and locked the doors, her heart pounding. That night, she told Abby everything. Abby listened, numb. "Mom, she's ruining you," Sophie said, tears in her eyes. And no one's stopping her. Abby wanted to reassure her daughter, to say that truth always wins, but she couldn't. Because in their small community, image was everything. And Vanessa's image was flawless. Meanwhile, Chloe disappeared from social media. Her messages went unanswered. Abby tried calling, texting, even mailing a card, but nothing came back. Vanessa must have blocked her number. The silence was suffocating. Nights grew long and restless. Abby replayed everything. Every smile, every conversation, every time Vanessa had said, "You're like a sister to me." Now it all felt rehearsed, like lines from a script. She began noticing the manipulation in hindsight, the subtle flattery, the small tests of loyalty, the way Vanessa always made herself the victim. Abby realized she hadn't just been betrayed. She'd been studied, used. The woman she once called her best friend wasn't who she claimed to be. Vanessa wasn't just cruel. She was dangerous. And as Abby watched her reputation crumble, she understood one terrifying truth. Vanessa wasn't finished yet. By the time Abby reached out to Vanessa Caldwell, she was running out of options. Everyone else seemed to believe Vanessa's carefully crafted lies. But Lauren, Vanessa's younger sister, was different. She had cut contact years earlier, and Abby hoped that meant she knew something. When Abby called, Lauren's voice was wary at first. "You're Vanessa's friend?" she asked cautiously. "I was," Abby said quietly, "until I realized what she's capable of." There was a long pause followed by a tired sigh. "Then you already know what I've known my whole life." Over coffee in a small Seattle cafe, Lauren began to talk. She was 37, a social worker, calm, methodical, the opposite of her older sister. As she spoke, pieces of Vanessa's puzzle finally clicked into place. "Vanessa's always been a master manipulator," Lauren said. "When we were kids, she'd lie just to see how far she could go. She turned family members against each other, stole money from my parents, even framed me once for something she did. I left when I was 20 because she nearly destroyed me." Abby listened, her chest tightening. "She's doing the same thing now, only this time it's with her daughter." Lauren nodded. "That sounds exactly like her. She thrives on control. But the good news is, people like Vanessa always leave a trail. If we can expose her with facts, not emotion, she'll have nowhere to hide. Together they made a plan. Vanessa was attending a family gathering in Salem the following weekend, a barbecue with cousins, aunts, and uncles who still thought she was the perfect mother and businesswoman. Lauren suggested confronting her there, in front of everyone, with undeniable proof. Abby hesitated at first. It felt cruel to air private pain so publicly. But then she remembered Chloe's trembling voice in that hospital bed. "Why doesn't Mom want me?" And she knew she had to do it. When the day came, Abby arrived with a folder clutched in her hands. Hospital records from Chloe's suicide attempt, screenshots of Vanessa's text dismissing it, and the crumpled note that had nearly broken her heart. "I'm not enough." Lauren was already there, her face set with quiet determination. At first, the event was exactly what Abby expected. Vanessa glowing in the center of attention, her laugh bright, her stories grand. She introduced Abby with false warmth, as though nothing had happened. But when Lauren stood up and said, "Vanessa, I think it's time we stop pretending," the air shifted. Conversations stopped. Everyone turned. Abby stepped forward, her voice steady. "You left your daughter while she was dying. You lied to everyone here. You tried to ruin my life to hide what you did." She opened the folder and laid the papers on the table one by one, photos, messages, timestamps. The silence was thick. Vanessa's cousin Mark frowned, reading the text where she'd refused to change her flight because it cost too much. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "Is this true?" Vanessa's mask cracked. "That's not what happened," she shouted, her voice rising. "She's twisting everything. You're all jealous because I built a better life." Lauren stepped in, her tone calm but firm. "Vanessa, the truth doesn't make people jealous. It makes them see you for who you really are." Mark spoke up again, his voice low. "You borrowed thousands from me, Vanessa. Said it was for Chloe's tuition. I never saw that money again." The color drained from Vanessa's face. Her perfect composure crumbled. She screamed, pointing at Abby and Lauren, calling them liars, manipulators, traitors. But it was too late. The family had seen the proof. The whispers that once followed Abby now turned toward Vanessa. And as her voice dissolved into angry sobs, the mask she'd worn for decades finally slipped, revealing not the perfect mother, but a frightened, furious woman cornered by her own lies. If Abby thought the confrontation in Salem would end things, she was wrong. Exposing Vanessa only pushed her further into a spiral of vengeance. Within days, Vanessa launched her counterattack, with precision, fury, and no trace of guilt. The first blow came in the form of a lawsuit. Abby received the papers at work: defamation, emotional distress, and interference with parental rights. Vanessa's accusations were twisted half-truths, laced with venom. She claimed Abby had traumatized Chloe, fabricated evidence, and slandered a mother's good name. Abby's hand shook as she read, her stomach knotting. Then came the second strike. Rumors spreading like wildfire through her hospital and neighborhood. Anonymous online posts accused Abby of being unstable, obsessed, even dangerous around children. Parents whispered when she passed. Old friends unfollowed her. Vanessa's influence reached further than Abby had ever imagined. The attacks soon turned physical. One morning, Abby walked out to her car and found her tires slashed, a nail lodged deep in the rubber. A few days later, Sophie came home pale and trembling. "Mom," she whispered, "someone wrote something on my locker." Abby followed her to the school, heart pounding. In bright red marker across the metal door, one word screamed back at her: traitor. Abby's voice cracked as she turned to the principal. Who did this? But no one knew. Or maybe no one dared to say. Things hit their breaking point when a Child Protective Services worker appeared at Abby's door. "We received a report," the woman said gently, "that your daughter is being emotionally neglected and manipulated into harassment." Abby stood frozen, realization dawning. Vanessa had filed the complaint. The investigation was brief. There was no evidence of abuse, but the humiliation burned. Abby could see what Vanessa was doing. Weaponizing systems meant to protect people, twisting them into tools of revenge. And then out of nowhere came the worst news of all. Chloe had been hospitalized again. Another breakdown. Another cry for help. But this time she told the doctors everything. Through tears, Chloe revealed the truth. Her mother had been locking her in the house for days, cutting off her phone, calling her a burden, a failure. She said I ruined her life, Chloe confessed to the social worker. I just wanted to disappear. The confession changed everything. CPS intervened immediately, and Lauren petitioned for emergency custody. For the first time, it seemed justice might finally catch up with Vanessa. But Vanessa wasn't done running. Days later, Sophie found a note slipped into her backpack at school. Crumpled, written in shaky handwriting. It read, "She's taking me away. Help me." Abby's blood ran cold. She called Lauren. She's gone. Vanessa's gone with Chloe. They notified the police, but hours turned into days. Then, a hiker in the Cascades reported seeing a woman and a teenage girl near an isolated cabin, miles from town. Abby and Lauren drove through winding roads and pine forests, hearts pounding with dread. When they finally arrived, they saw Chloe's pale face peeking through the cabin window, eyes wide with fear. Abby stepped out of the car, hands raised. "Chloe, it's okay. You're safe now." Then the door flew open. Vanessa emerged, her hair wild, a knife clutched in her trembling hand. "You'll never take her," she screamed, her voice breaking. Lauren grabbed her phone, whispering to 911. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance, growing louder. Abby's heart thudded as officers surrounded the cabin. Chloe ran into their arms, crying, shaking, whispering one word over and over, "free." And for the first time in months, Abby let herself breathe. But deep down, she knew it wasn't over yet. Because with someone like Vanessa, the danger never truly disappeared. The drive to the mountains felt endless. Rain lashed against the windshield, blurring the world into streaks of gray and silver. Abby sat beside Lauren in the front seat of the police vehicle, her hands clenched so tightly that her nails dug into her palms. Every minute mattered. Every mile meant the difference between saving Chloe or losing her forever. When they finally reached the remote cabin, the forest stood deathly still. The air was cold, wet, and heavy with tension. Through the fogged-up window, Abby caught a glimpse of movement, a small shadow pacing near the window. It was Chloe. Her face was pale, her hair tangled, and her body looked frail, as if fear itself had drained her of color. Vanessa appeared behind her, clutching a kitchen knife, eyes wild and unrecognizable. She looked nothing like the polished, calculating woman Abby once knew. Her voice cracked through the quiet woods like lightning. "You'll never take her. She's mine. None of you understand. She needs me." The police stepped forward cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the mist. Abby's voice trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "Vanessa, please. Let her go. This doesn't have to end like this." But Vanessa's face twisted with rage and desperation. She backed toward Chloe, pressing the knife closer. "You all turned against me. I gave her everything." The officers acted fast. One lunged through the door. Another grabbed Vanessa's arm as the knife clattered to the floor. Vanessa screamed, a raw, guttural sound, before collapsing to her knees, her body shaking, her eyes hollow. The illusion of control was gone. The mask had fallen. Chloe ran straight into Abby's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. Abby held her tight, whispering, "You're safe now. I've got you. You're safe." Lauren stood beside them, tears streaming down her face, relief breaking through the storm of fear that had consumed them for weeks. Outside, the flashing red and blue lights painted the trees like fractured memories. The wind carried away the last echoes of Vanessa's screams as she was led into the police car, her empire of lies finally crumbling. Chloe trembled in Abby's arms, whispering, "I thought she'd never let me go." Abby kissed her forehead gently. "She won't hurt you again. It's over." As dawn began to break over the horizon, the forest slowly filled with the sound of rain easing, a faint promise of calm after chaos. Abby looked back at the cabin one last time, that cold, dark place that had held so much pain, and exhaled deeply. The wolf had finally been unmasked. Months later, the storm had finally settled. The courtroom was quiet the day the verdict was read. Vanessa sat at the defense table, her once confident posture now small, fragile. The judge's voice was calm but firm. Vanessa would undergo mandatory psychiatric treatment and would only be allowed to see Chloe under strict supervision. No outbursts, no manipulation, no more shadows. Abby watched from the gallery, her heart torn between sorrow and relief. There was no triumph in seeing someone so broken. Only a quiet understanding that justice, when done right, is not vengeance, it's protection. Chloe began living with Lauren in Seattle. The first few weeks were hard: nightmares, silence, flinches at sudden sounds. But slowly, the light began to return. She started to draw again. Bright colors, smiling faces, trees with sunlight breaking through them. One morning, she surprised Abby with a sketch, the two of them holding hands, standing in front of a sunrise. "It's us," she said shyly. "The bad days are behind." Abby smiled, holding back tears. Sophie visited often too, baking cookies, helping Chloe with schoolwork, bringing laughter back into the house. The bond between them grew, quiet and steady, like spring following winter. Sometimes Abby still saw Vanessa, across the street from the courthouse or in passing dreams. "Her eyes are empty now," she once said softly. "The mask is gone. And maybe that's her punishment, to finally face herself." The story didn't end with revenge. It ended with healing, with love that refused to give up. And in that fragile, beautiful recovery, they all learned that true strength isn't about fighting the darkness. It's about finding light again together. From that journey, Abby learned 5 truths that would stay with her forever. 1. Trust your instincts. When something feels off, it usually is. She'd ignored her gut too long, convincing herself that kindness meant silence. But silence only feeds manipulation. 2. Love protects, not possesses. Real love gives space to grow. It doesn't control or demand. Vanessa's version of love was built on fear, and it nearly destroyed her daughter. 3. Truth finds a way. Lies can spread fast, but truth has endurance. No matter how loud the rumors got, the evidence, the notes, the testimonies eventually spoke louder. 4. Family is chosen. Abby learned that blood isn't always loyalty. Lauren, Sophie, and Chloe became a chosen family. Proof that genuine care doesn't need a shared last name. 5. Resilience wins. Healing takes time, but it's the most powerful form of justice. Abby and Chloe didn't win through anger. They won through survival, compassion, and courage. In the end, the scars remained, quiet reminders of the past. But they also told a story of triumph. That even after betrayal, the heart can still choose love, and the soul can still rebuild. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Every story we tell reminds us that strength begins with seeing the truth and having the courage to act on it. Tell us in the comments. When did you realize someone's mask had finally slipped? Your story might be the light that helps someone else see theirs.